All right, let me start that all over again. I'm Jolene Warnke. I am the program manager for the commercial non-commercial program with University of Minnesota Extension Pesticide Safety and Environmental Education Program. We abbreviate that as PSEE. And I am joined today with our WPS coordinator with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Gregorio Mendez Ortega. And we are going to spend the next few minutes talking about worker protection standards and a brief overview of how to comply. And hopefully everybody can see the screen, the slideshow. This recording will be available on our YouTube video following today's webinar. You are more than welcome to ask questions either by unmuting yourself or by using the chat box. And you can wait until the very end or as they come up. So let's get started here. So first, I will refer to the How to Comply manual multiple times during this presentation. This is what it looks like. And maybe my computer will let you see what the book looks like. We have a hard copy book available to mail to you if you request a packet of information, which I will share with you in just a moment. And this is the How to Comply with the 2015 Revised Worker Protection Standards for Agricultural Pesticides. That is the latest version. In this book, we will cover when does the WPS apply? Does it apply to you? Where can you find WPS compliance materials and what to do if you need assistance? So first, I ask you, have you received your free printed materials? We do offer a nice big packet of materials to be sent to anybody who attends a webinar. If not, you can email me your address and I'll be happy to send those out to you. It includes a hard copy of the How to Comply, a smaller version of the central posting poster, which I'll show you in this presentation, as well as a lot of other resources related to respirator use, employer information, protecting yourself from pesticides. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in there. So if you'd like that, please don't forget to email me. So the first thing that we're going to cover is when does WPS apply? So the easiest visual way to know if WPS applies by finding this agricultural use requirements box on the pesticide label. So if you look at your label that's on the pesticide container and you see an agricultural use requirements box, then the WPS applies if three conditions are met. So first, it must contain this box, or it must contain information about worker protection standard. I did recently see a label that didn't have the box, but it did have some text in a short paragraph. And so then it would still apply. It also must be used on an agricultural establishment, which we'll cover in a minute, and it must be used directly related to the production of an agricultural plant. And so this is focused on agricultural plants. It does not include livestock or other agricultural products that are not plants. And so let's dive into this a little more. Does the WPS apply to you? So do you operate a business in which you or employees apply pesticides in an agricultural setting? So what do agricultural settings look like? So I think the easiest one most people recognize is a traditional row crop. So a traditional row crop would be an agricultural setting. But also sod farms. Again, this is a production plant that's being grown. So sod farms would count as an agricultural setting. Nurseries and greenhouses, nurseries that grow plants, whether it's for plant parts, transplants, flowers, cuttings, seeds, whatever they happen to be growing. Timbered areas, so forestry, or tree stands that are collected for plant material, so the wood, or if they're harvested for the other plant materials like seeds or pine needles. Again, we mentioned greenhouses, hoop houses, high tunnels, any of those that are also in the production of agricultural plants. And then also hay fields, if they are being harvested for hay, for use on site or off site. If they're being harvested, that time will be when the WPS applies. All right, the next question is, do you operate a business in which you or employees perform crop advisor tasks? So if you are performing crop advisor tasks, there is a separate section in the How to Comply manual that lays out the requirements if you are a certified crop advisor versus a just an individual who is performing crop advisor tasks but is not a certified crop advisor. We also do another segment in one of our webinars that goes a little bit more in depth into those requirements. So I hope that you can join us for that in the future. Do you hire or contract workers to do tasks related to crop production on an agricultural establishment? So we've laid out what the agricultural establishments look like. And if you hire or contract workers to do tasks in those areas, then the WPS would apply. Again, if you're using a WPS labeled product for the direct production of an agricultural crop. Do you yourself apply pesticides in agricultural settings? So we have a term for commercial applicators, commercial handlers, sorry, in WPS. And those are generally the individuals that come in that are hired by contract to come in. But there is on-farm application of pesticides as well, or on-site application of pesticides as well. So whether you apply it as part of the establishment or whether you apply pesticides because you've been hired to come in as an outside agency, then the WPS would apply to you. All right, so let's take a quick look over some other unique agricultural establishments. So these are things that most people don't necessarily think of based on the description of the WPS, but family farms are covered under the WPS, even if only family members are the only ones who work on the establishment. Now, there are some exemptions. Again, we cover that in another webinar more in depth, but they are not exempt fully from the WPS compliance. Also, establishments that grow seedling and transplants. So I did mention that, things like nurseries and greenhouses. So even if they're not producing agricultural commodities like food crops, if they're producing plants that are being sold as commodities, even for seedlings or transplants, then those are also considered covered under the WPS. Golf courses that grow turf grass for sod. So the golf course itself would not be covered under WPS, but if they have any sort of landscape growing areas, whether they're in ground or greenhouse, nursery style, maybe they're growing sod to replace divots, or they're growing nursery plants to, add to the landscaping or to replace plants in the landscaping. Those sections where the growing is occurring would be covered under WPS, but not the golf course where players play. University agricultural research facilities. These are also covered under the WPS if they are using WPS labeled products. And prisons that have prison farms. So again, where prison farms are still growing agricultural commodities for consumption. So they would also be covered under WPS protections. So now let's talk a little bit about the people who are involved. So these are 4 terms that you will see consistently throughout the How to Comply manual. There's a worker, handler, agricultural employer, and the commercial pesticide handler employer, which is a really long name. So they have the acronym CPHE. In the pesticide world, we just call these like commercial outfits, commercial companies. If you are a commercial or non-commercial applicator, you work for a CPHE or you're self-employed. So that's what we would consider the CPHE. Agriculture, and we'll get into the other definitions in just a minute. All right, so what is a worker as defined by WPS? So you're a pesticide worker if you are employed in exchange for a salary or wages or other monetary compensation, and you're doing tasks directly related to the production of agricultural plants on an agricultural establishment, but you're not working with the pesticides or any of the pesticide equipment. So these would involve harvesting, weeding, carrying nurse stock, repotting plants, pruning plants, doing watering and irrigation. So Other tasks that are not directly related to pesticide work or pesticide equipment, those would be worker tasks, and you would be defined as a worker by WPS. So what is a handler? So we always think of the handler as the person who applies the pesticide, but it actually involves a lot more other tasks than just applying. So it could be direct application of pesticides or operating the pesticide application equipment, but it also can include those who mix and load application equipment. So if they're doing mixing in the mixing stations or they're loading equipment, that is also considered a handler. Those who work with used containers or containers that are open. So whether that is transporting containers that have been opened, or cleaning out, rinsing containers, or managing the disposal of used containers, that is all considered under the handler definition. Those that act as support staff, like ground crews for aerial application. And those who are doing other tasks, even if the plants are not present. So in this case, they're doing disinfecting of this, excuse me, of this space. And even though there's no plants present, the disinfectant, believe it or not, is a pesticide, is a registered pesticide, but it is for the direct production of plants. So that would still be considered a handler by WPS. Okay, so now let's talk about the other two people, the agricultural employer and the commercial pesticide handler employer. So the ag employer is any person who's the owner or is responsible for the management or the condition of the agricultural establishment and who employs any worker or handler. So this could include the farm owner. It could include the person who is leasing the establishment, who's leasing the land but runs the establishment. It is the person who employs the workers or the handlers. Now, the commercial pesticide handler employer is a person who employs any handler to perform handler activities on the agricultural establishment, but they're not part of the agricultural establishment. So the commercial pesticide handler would be, again, somebody who's hired from an outside company who comes into the application or the agricultural establishment to do handler duties. So it could be, again, a commercial applicator who comes in to do the actual application of pesticides, but it could also be the disposal company that comes in to dispose of the agricultural chemicals or the containers on that agricultural establishment. So it could include those handler duties as well. So some information from the How to Comply manual that may be different than what we consider state licensing. So the minimum age for handlers, again, any of the tasks that handlers would do related to pesticides or pesticide equipment, the minimum age to conduct any of those duties is 18. And that may differ from other pesticide licensing requirements within the state for other non-agricultural pesticide work. So for instance, we have the lawn care industry. The lawn care industry is not covered by WPS. They're not working for the production of agricultural plants. So the minimum age for people who apply pesticides in the landscape, it may vary, may be different than 18 established by WPS. The minimum age for early entry workers is 18. So an early entry worker is an individual who goes into the treated space before the restricted entry interval has expired, but they're not applying pesticides and not doing any of the handler tasks. They're going in there to do other worker tasks. Maybe they're doing some irrigation or moving irrigation equipment, or they need to retrieve tools or equipment from the field that's not application equipment. So those would be considered early entry workers. Their minimum age is 18 as well. Workers cannot mix, load, or apply pesticides or assist in their applications unless they've been trained as a handler. So if you have workers that are out there, maybe they're seeding, and there needs to be an application in another field, they cannot be asked to come and assist with that application unless they've been trained as a handler. And we'll tell you how to conduct that training. That's not to say that it's a cumbersome task to do before you need their help, but you must complete those requirements before they can be asked to do any of the requirements as a handler. So a very strong note here, there is no grace period for training requirements, meaning a person must be trained prior to conducting any work within the treated area or handling pesticides. So there's no grace period. This was one of the significant changes in the 2015 to ensure that the workers and handlers are protected and understand the requirements for their work. So what does WPS specific training look like? So all workers must receive WPS specific training. So again, these are individuals who are going into the treated areas to conduct work not related to pesticides or pesticide equipment. They have to receive WPS specific training before they're allowed to work in those areas. Handlers must receive WPS specific training if they're not certified applicators. So if you are an establishment and you work, you have handlers who've gone to get their state pesticide applicator license, those individuals do not need to take additional WPS training, although we do recommend it because there are some things specific to WPS that aren't necessarily covered in the pesticide licensing realm. But if you are an establishment where you do not have certified applicators or licensed applicators, those individuals must receive WPS training. So they might be the individuals who are doing pesticide applications on site, but they're not required to have a license if they're not using restricted use pesticides. At least that's how it is in Minnesota. So they may not have any kind of license of their own, but they must be trained with the WPS specific training prior to doing that work. Who can do this training? Well, any certified applicator, whether you're certified in the private, commercial, or non-commercial realm in Minnesota, can conduct WPS training. So private applicators are individuals who own an establishment. We call them producers or farmers who do applications on their own land and only on their own land. So the private applicator might have a license because they choose to use restricted use pesticides, or maybe they just prefer to have that licensor. That person conduct WPS training. Or a certified applicator from the commercial outfit or the non-commercial outfit can also conduct WPS training. A state designated person, so that would be somebody like myself or Gregorio or any of the MDA staff who've been designated by the state as qualified individuals to conduct WPS training. Or let's just say neither one of those are available, or that's not your preference. Any person who completes the approved Train the Trainer program can conduct WPS training. So this might be if you have a safety officer on site or at your establishment, or maybe the HR person. Those individuals can complete the online Train the Trainer program, and then they would be qualified to conduct the WPS training for your individuals or for other individuals. Now we're going to talk a minute about what commercial handlers need to do. And again, this was one of the most significant changes in the 2015 revision is making sure that the commercial handlers are communicating information and that they're also receiving information. So whenever a commercial pesticide handler, which could include crop advisors, performs a handling task on the agricultural establishment, they must provide the agricultural employer with information about the pesticide application being conducted. Now, this information generally does go between the commercial establishment, the commercial company, and the agricultural establishment that they're treating. Generally, they send the records, they'll send the invoice, they'll show what they've treated and how much they use, and then they send the bill accordingly. But this information actually has to be shared prior to the application. Most of it is information that they're already collecting or planning with their application. So there's a few more items that are required by WPS, but most of it would be the general application information that the commercial handler would already have available to them. So this is what it looks like. They must provide information about the specific location and or the description of the areas to be treated. So this can be whether it's an address, a field location, GPS coordinates, pings on a map, whatever it is that they're showing the specific location or description of the area to be treated. And that's including if they're treating like individual trees, then they can just like outline where those trees are located. Posting requirements according to the label. So does the label require notification to individuals by orally, visually, or both? So that would be on the label. And so the CPHE must provide that to the establishment so that they know how to notify the individuals on site. The date, start time, and estimated end time of the pesticide application. And this is really important if there are updates. So again, when do you plan to be out there? What time do you plan to start? What's your estimated end time, which most commercial handlers can tell you based on the size of the property and what they're applying. And this is really important because the restricted entry interval, which is listed on the pesticide label, starts when that application stops. So that's why the ag employer needs to know about what time do you plan to stop so that they can start their notifications if they need a post and make sure that the REI is in place at that time. Any label requirements for the protection of people during or after application. The pesticide product name, EPA registration number, and the active ingredients. And this is really important because the ag employer must post labels and safety data sheets specific to the products that are being used. And that's why it's very important that they have both the name and the EPA registration number of the products being used so that they can have copies of those labels and the safety data sheets to post in the central posting areas or to have available for reference in case of emergency. And the active ingredients that are part of those products as well. The REI for the pesticide product. So the restricted entry interval is information that will be found in that agricultural use box on the pesticide label. And it refers to the time in which no persons can be in the treated area unless they have been trained as an early entry worker. And so that REI could be anything from 4 hours to multiple days. And during that time, the area must be posted for no entry. And again, specific individuals must be trained if they need to go into that area during that time. What happens if there's changes? So if the commercial applicator runs into some issues, maybe their equipment broke down or they're running late from a previous job, they must inform the ag employer prior to the application if there's changes. So whether it's their start time, their estimated end time, or whether they need to reverse treatment areas because of the way the wind's blowing or the weather conditions. If there's a change in the product that they're using, maybe, last minute they decide it's not the appropriate weather conditions to apply a certain product and they need to change. Anything that has to do with the application changes need to be communicated to the ag employer before that work is done. Okay, so the ag employer must also communicate to the commercial outfitter. And this area is this information is basically anything in those areas that the CPHE may come in contact with. So are there any treated areas that are under restrictions already on the establishment? We know a lot of times we're not treating the entire establishment at one time. So there might be some fields that were treated last week or 2 days ago, and then they're coming out to treat some additional fields. So are there any treated areas that already have restrictions that are under an REI on that establishment? They need to be notified if there's a specific location and the description of the treated areas that a handler may be in or walk within a 1/4 mile of. Now, they don't have to speak for their neighbors. They don't have to represent all the agricultural commodity people in that area, but only that ag establishment, that ag employer has to talk about or has to relay the information related to their treated fields or their specific locations that are under an REI that a handler may walk within a quarter mile of. If any of those areas exist, what are the restrictions on entering those areas? So when will the REI expire? What PPE is required? What are the requirements for early entry worker? That information would come off of the pesticide label. So where do you find all of this information? I know we've covered quite a bit in a very short period of time, but we have some great resources for you. I really do, not that I enjoy reading technical information all the time, but the How to Comply manual is laid out in very plain language. It is on the easier side to read as far as being able to comprehend what it's trying to tell you. It's not in depth like a lot of our federal registry information that's very technical and um, difficult to understand. There are some great checklists in the back of the book. And so first, I will tell you that the Minnesota Department of Agriculture will be a primary resource for you for compliance assistance, inspections, or these training materials. So they do have these training materials in their offices and can provide those to you. They also provide compliance assistance, which I'll let Gregorio talk about when I turn it over to him. We also have program materials within our program. So PSDE, my office is located in Andover, but I do travel the state because I do the recertification workshops, and I usually have materials with me. So I can sometimes deliver these on site, depending on where you're located, but we do have them in the office. And again, we can also mail you materials. We'll provide training materials. We also can do some training assistance and answer general questions, but we do not provide the compliance assistance or inspection information. So that would be through the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. All of the materials that we mentioned are available for free to the public from the PERC website. And the PERC stands for Pesticide Educational Resource Collaborative. Their website is pesticideresources.com. Excuse me, they provide training materials. They also have a very useful tool called the Compliance Library, where it'll ask you questions and you type in the answer, and then it will tell you whether the WPS applies to you under certain conditions. And then they also have general information. The Train the Trainer materials are also found on this website. They have both the Train the Trainer manual, and they also have the online course that you can take to be certified to do WPS training. So again, this WPS How to Comply manual covers WPS responsibilities, which we briefly went over, record keeping requirements, training requirements for workers and handlers, emergency assistance, the decontamination supply requirements, exemptions and some exceptions to the WPS, respiratory training criteria, and more. We also have follow-up webinars that kind of break these specific topics down into sessions just like this. So I believe the next one is record keeping requirements. That's next month. And so we'll just be focused on that section of the WPS How to Comply manual. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Gregorio with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to share some information with you on his behalf. Go ahead, Gregorio.
Yeah, thank you, Yolene, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Webinars, I hope that you will continue to join us in the future, and you will find this useful. Today, I'm gonna share with you 3 pieces of information that probably you will be using later on, we hope. One is, this is the information that you must provide to your workers and handlers and must be displayed at the central location regarding the state pesticide regulatory agency, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, our address, the main office, and also the phone for our complaint line. This is information that is required to be provided to the workers and handlers, be displayed, as I say, that you look out in your central location and has to be accessible, easy to see and to read, legible. How you're gonna display it is up to you. If you're using a pesticide safety poster, the Yulin is gonna mention later, there is a box there in which you can write down with a marker this information there for your workers to see. Or if you decide to print out a standalone sign, also you can do that. But this also, it is an item that the workers will be trained in when they receive the pesticide safety training. So give you a minute to write down this information or take a picture of the screen or just capture the screen. This is what it is going to be or is required for you to have there and display it. The next slide, it is also some information that oh, I believe there is a question or a comment in the chat.
It's actually me, Gregorio. I'm putting this
Okay.
information in the chat box for everybody so that they have that for reference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we go to the next slide? This is my contact information. This is my when you can reach me at my office phone number. I'm here during office hours. You can give me a call or text on my cell phone number. Send me an email if you have any questions. You don't want to ask those questions here during the webinars. Give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, send me a letter. That is my mailing address as there as well. But all the information that you provide and any questions, it is handled confidentially. So be sure that we're going to be taking care of that very professional, confidentially. And the next slide is going to give us the information regarding the compliance assistant inspections. We at MDA, we are having the opportunity to provide the compliance assistant inspections. These are not enforcement-driven inspections. So hopefully that you decide to take this opportunity and bring it to your establishment. With this, you can find more information to going to our website. Go to the website. This is the address there. Type compliance assistance inspections on the share box, and then the links will be open there. And that when you click it and access to the link, you will receive or will see the information regarding the compliance assistant and also the information of the different ACIs, inspectors around the state with the contact information as well. You can ask for a compliance assistant directly to them. You can give me a call if you want to schedule one, or you can also contact the pesticide complaint line and talk to Dave. He's the one who mans that the line during work hours, and he will help you also to schedule a compliance assistant inspections. Compliance assistant inspections are not only for the worker protection standard regulations, but also for any other pesticide regulatory information, pesticide use, chemigation, pesticide storage, and so forth. This is all what I have for you today.
Great. Are there any questions for Gregorio about any of the information that he just presented? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move forward. And so that is incorrect. We do have another webinar coming up. It is not January 9th, and I will find out when that is, and I will post that. And then here's our information again for reaching out to either me regarding training materials or information about the training materials or other free resources, or Gregorio related to any of the topics that he just presented. Are there any questions at this time? All right, well, I want to thank everybody for coming today and joining our webinar. Again, these will be posted on the PSEE YouTube channel, and I will send a follow-up email. We would really appreciate your feedback on this webinar or any of the other ones that you've attended by filling out our evaluation and providing some feedback to us so that we can make sure that these are valuable resources for you in the future. And again, if you would like a packet of free printed materials, I ask that you just simply email me, and I will put that in the chat box as well. Send me your mailing address, your name and your mailing address, and I will put those in the packet. In the mail this week. I have packets already ready to go, so I can easily send those out to you. And with that, I really appreciate all your time today. I'm going to stop recording and then allow us to hang on the line for just a minute in case you have any additional questions.